Marketing plans. Prepared for and presented at the 2019 Square One Entrepreneurship Training Program. Square One is a program of the Center for Emerging Technologies. CET is an affiliate of the Cortex Innovation Community. Square One is funded in part by the Missouri Technology Corporation.
I've worked at both small and large companies. I spent about 20 years with Anheuser-Busch and Sara Lee in consumer products. But then I also worked at a company called Tech Shop. It was right down the street. It was a startup based out of California. So I've done, most of my career has been in marketing as well as in business development. So today, before I talk about putting together a marketing plan, first and foremost, Mark had alluded to the fact that this looks like me. I was never that good looking, but the reason I put this up there, a friend of mine sent this to me one time, and they said, "Kristen, this is what you look like after an hour, my hair." So if my hair's standing up, will you do me a favor, do what my wife does, just kind of pat it down, okay? But that's why I put that up here. But no, really, we're going to talk about a marketing plan. But before we talk about a marketing plan, you all are building a brand. I think you all know when a brand is just how you're being perceived, right? Who isn't building a brand here already? Okay, so I'm like most of you. I'm trying to get rid of my Halloween candy, so I'm going to ask for a couple volunteers to pull a piece of candy out of this bag and describe the brand of that candy bar. Okay, so I'm going to have you go first, and you get to actually keep whatever you pick out of here. So describe for the group what that brand, when you think of that, what is that, a Snickers? When you think of Snickers, what do you think about?
Hungry while waiting.
Oh, okay, great. I'm going to go down the line. Pick a. So when you think of Hershey's, what do you think about? Almonds. And chocolate.
Bar.
Good, bad, something you got to have?
Not really.
Okay.
Not this flavor, but it's pretty good.
You like the ones without the nuts?
You're right.
Okay. That's okay. You can give it to someone else, but describe the, okay, what is that? Kit Kat. What do you know about Kit Kat? Well, you see Kit Kat. Delicious. Okay, Jerry, pull one out of here. Okay, Skittles. When you think about Skittles.
I think
Cute. That's the brand for Skittles. As long as what you perceive it. And finally, can you get? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't even looking.
What do you think when you think of Reese's?
Creamy chocolate. Frosting with peanut butter.
Right. And I think Reese's, somebody told me for Halloween, Reese's is what the #1 most desired candy bar is Reese's. So those are some brands we just talked about. So you're building your brand. But before we talk about building a brand, I want to talk about what marketing is real quickly. So let me just have a couple people. I went on the web and I just pulled out what other people think marketing is. We may or may not agree, but I think most of these hit the nail on the head. So Bob, would you want to read the first one?
the action or business of promoting and selling products or services, including market research and advertising.
Okay, and let's see, who else? You want to read the second one?
Marketing is the process of communicating the value of the product or the service to customers and the purpose of selling a product or service.
Okay, and can I have, I'm sorry, your name?
Mitch,
Mitch, can you read that third one?
it's the first step to show up on the market and say, hey, we're here.
I really like that one. I don't know about you, but that's, so I wanted, before we go into marketing plans, let's just set the stage of what we're talking about when we're talking about marketing. And when we talk about a marketing plan, there's so many different types of marketing plans. Today, you've seen marketing plans that start with the target market, talk about the service and product, your pricing strategy, sales distribution, advertising, promotion plan. That is one of many types of plans you can put together. Today, I'm going to focus on one that I've always used. Not that it's right or wrong, but I've been an entrepreneur. It's one I think that gets directly to not only a strategic plan, but a tactical plan, something you can do tomorrow. And that is really to talk about marketing research, put together some objectives, tactics, and then ways to measure to make sure the marketing is working. But my goal for this class is to know my audience. Marketing is all about knowing your audience. And so I've worked for entrepreneurs. I definitely am not what you consider a classic entrepreneur, but I'm going to try to make sure I make it relevant for you and the Square One class today. So that is, I'm going to provide ideas that do two things. Provide, first of all, little resources, both time and dollars. I work for a lot of non-for-profits as a volunteer, and you know, it's so easy to throw out at these meetings and when you have brainstorming sessions ideas, but most of those non-for-profits think, oh, these are great ideas, but we don't have time or money to be able to implement this, or people. So I'm going to try to give you some ideas today that make it easy for you to implement. And then I want to deliver at least 3 ideas you could easily implement today, okay? I think there's one that I really think hopefully resonates. This I'm not going to go through, but this is typically the type of plans I put together. You start with an executive summary. So if you have anybody looking at that plan, they don't have to go through the whole plan. It's a one-pager that really summarizes your plan. You talk about the situation. What is the current situation? Your competition, what's going on in the marketplace, really just trying to understand what is the current situation. Marketing trends. I think it's always important for you to talk to a lot of people to say, what are the latest and greatest marketing trends? And then you decide what makes sense for your business. And then what are those vehicles? We talk about understanding what you're currently doing. You get feedback from people that will be selling you or somebody that will be assisting you. You do some competitive analysis, and it doesn't require much more than just going and Googling your competitors. This is where I'm going to spend a lot of time having a marketing communications platform. For several years, I actually helped run Square One, so I understand where some of you all are coming from. So I'm going to try to talk about the marketing communications plan, which I think really resonated with a lot of entrepreneurs when I worked with them. And then, most importantly, put together some strategic objectives, some tactics to support those and implement the plan. So I'm going to take just a couple of those. One is identify what are the current marketing industry trends. What are ways that you can market? We all know some of the typical ones. You know, it's obviously on your website, and social media, in print. But try to brainstorm on ways that you can market yourself. Don't always look at the most obvious ones. So for instance, thought leadership. I work for a company right now. It's all about getting our attorneys, I do out there writing, speaking, podcasting, and you don't have to sell anymore nowadays. So for instance, if you own a ski shop, yes, it's important that you advertise your sales and the skis you have, but I want to know where's the best place to go skiing. If that comes from you, I start building that relationship. If I break my skis, even though you can repair skis, you tell me how I can repair my skis. You give me tips, tools, suggestions to help my life easier, to save money, and that's one of the, it's been around, thought leadership, subject matter experts. You want to give people tips, tools, suggestions, and you're already selling yourself and your product or service. We also have, we all know about video, but I see so many people that use video and they're in a 5-minute video. Most people have attention deficit disorder, and not everybody. And so people really have limited time to look at your videos, so make it less than 2 minutes. But these, again, are just things that you can do and brainstorm to say, is this right for me? This is not a comprehensive list, but just some ideas of what some of the current marketing trends are. List available marketing vehicles. So we all know, some people call them flyers or one-pagers that you give to people. We've heard of infographics, direct mail, where you get an actual piece in the mail. We have training seminars. People can blog. You can have on-hold messaging. There's so many ways you can market your products and services. This, by no means, is a comprehensive list, but I think it's important that you constantly talk to people to say, hey, what can I do to market my product and service? And that will depend upon your product or your service. Okay? I think it's always important that you research best practices. And when I say that, if I'm selling, we had somebody in Square One class who was selling waffles. And people would say, okay, we're going to find out what other consumer products companies are doing, so I might do the same thing. I used to push people to say, don't always look at your category. look outside the category. So when I was in the bakery industry, we didn't look at what other bakeries were doing. We looked at who our market was. Our market was, at that time, women and kids. That's who we were selling our bakery products to. So I said, we looked at what other aisle in the grocery store was appealing to both moms and kids. And that was the cereal aisle. So we looked at the cereal aisle, see what they were doing, and we implemented some of the same ideas. So let me give you an example. We, believe it or not, started putting things in our loaves of bread, like trading cards, instant wins, which is what the cereal aisle did, but nobody was doing it in the bakery aisle. So my point is, don't always look at the obvious, what your competition's doing, and just be a me too. You want to stand out. So look at another category that's targeting the same demographics, the same audience as you are, and then see what they're doing. Marketing a lot of times is just stealing great ideas from somebody else. But don't just steal them from your competitor, because then you just look like a me too. Look at what other categories are doing and just mimic some of those things, okay? Find out what works, what doesn't work. Assess your competition though. I think it's important that you assess your competition, but don't spend too much time. If you just do what your competition's doing, again, you're a me too, you'll never be a leader, okay? And then search for what I call key potential initiatives to test and pilot. I can't tell you the number of people that say, I got a great idea, I'm going to invest in direct mail or SEO. And I say, well, you know, I wouldn't sign a contract. I test it on a small basis so you don't spend a lot of money. You test it first, and then if it goes really well, then maybe you invest a little more money. But spend very little time and energy in testing different things. And if they work, then you invest a little more. Most marketing, not all, is measurable. Most marketing is. Somebody said to me one time, well, what about that billboard? We put up a billboard, and I'm not telling any of you to put up a billboard, but if you put up a billboard, you look at your Google Analytics to see if there's some call to action on that billboard that you're seeing that people are going to your website more. So most marketing, not all, is measurable now. Conduct analysis of current marketing. So most of you, I know, are early stage. You haven't done any marketing yet. If you have, assess what you're doing now. Don't assume it's working. Always be every 6 months to a year, reevaluate your marketing and making sure you're doing the right thing before you spend any time or energy or money. Analyze your competitors, and it's something as simple as a one-pager. And when I say a marketing plan, years ago, marketing plans used to be 20 pages. You could do a marketing plan 4 or 5 pages now. If you know who your competition is, maybe you lay it out like this, and you go to the web. Competitor 1, 2, and 3. What's the positioning? Who are they selling to? What do they say on the website? Things of that nature. That should be a part of your marketing if you know who your competitors are. This is where I'm going to spend most time. This should be part of your plan. How many of you, well, I'll tell you what I remember. A lot of times I'd work with a lot of entrepreneurs and they had a great idea and we'd sit and I'd help coach them and they had a lot of great ideas and they're verbalizing. And I said, do you have any of this in writing? No. And I go, what do you mean? You have a piece of paper that says, you know, what's your positioning, what's your product, your service, what's your value prop? No, I got it all up here. Here's one tool, and I think they handed this out, Ricky handed it out. One tool I strongly encourage you, if you don't already have, you should do as part of your marketing plan. And this is what I want to call a brand communications platform. And really, it doesn't take very long. It's a one-pager, and it really just does a couple things. First and foremost, you want to describe your product or your service. And I know you know it, but most of you, I know, are getting help. You're either getting help from Mark, Ricky, Square One. You have friends and family that are helping you. But most people are visual, so even though you articulate it, they'd like to have something in writing. You can just email them before you ask for their advice or suggestions. So this one pager would be perfect. So what your elevator pitch is, I know you all are working on elevator pitches. You probably have mastered it by now. Write it down. Who your target audience is, your primary and secondary audience. So when I was in the bakery industry, our primary audience at that point were moms, and then secondary, they were kids. You want to also, your point of difference. So what makes you different than anybody else who does what you're doing? Write that down. Don't just keep it up here. Features and supports and supporting facts. So you said that the reason your product is different is because of X, Y, and Z. Explain why. Key messaging. So think about this. I don't expect any of you or suggest any of you take out an ad in the St. Louis Business Journal. But let's say you were going to write an ad tomorrow. Most people can only remember 3 things. If you were going to write an ad tomorrow and you had buku bucks, what would be the 3 things you'd want to communicate in that ad? Okay? What's that?
I thought you were asking.
You could, yeah, I'd like to know. Can you give me one of them?
Yeah, mine would be on-demand roadside assistance, competitive pricing, no membership fees.
Thank you. Perfect. So 3 things. Again, most people can only remember 3 things. So play like you're writing an ad and write those 3 things down. Those features and support key messages. And then your call to action. So once I read that ad,
That's on my app now.
okay, that's your call to action. Perfect. But most people don't have a call to action, so make sure you have a call to action. So even if you're not writing an ad or doing an ad, you're going to meet Chris Ruzicka or Chris Ruzicka-like people that say, hey, I want to help you, but how can I help you? And then you're going to verbalize. If I had something like this beforehand or even 5 minutes after we met, as I'm listening, I'd be able to help you a lot faster and get a better grasp of what you do. So what I can remember working with entrepreneurs is they had some great ideas and they articulated, and I'm still absorbing the first 2 sentences. If I had a sheet like this, even if I looked at it 5 minutes into the conversation, it'd be a lot more helpful for me to help you. So you all are, like me, we're always looking to other people to assist us. This would be a better tool. The other thing is, how many of you have, and some of you I already asked you today probably, I met most of you here, you probably have the same questions people ask you all the time. Like, what do people ask you about your product or service when you explain what it is? What are some of the common questions they asked you?
How do I pay? Like, can I pay cash or
Right?
can I answer in app?
Perfect. So start collecting those same questions. If you get this question at least 1 or 2 times, write it down and then put together the answer. So consistently you're responding to that question over and over again. But write it down. Because again, I'll bet most of you are getting the same questions when you tell me your product or service. Write down the question and then put together an answer. Because you're going to get that question again. Mark.
Chris, you could even do one of these for competitor brands or key brands and lay them out on the table side by side or work them into the
That's a
same
great idea.
Excel sheet or something like that. I mean, what Chris is talking about is it works. You can put yourself in the mind frame of your competitor or use information you've received from customers or from people at trade shows, and you can work backwards into how your competition's positioning themselves. Then you've got a single source where you can just lay them out on the table and look at each other, and it's much easier to maybe find some
That's a great idea.
where they've got weaknesses.
Here's another reason I like this tool. Jerry, let's say you're really now getting further along and somebody says, well, can you send me a flyer on this product or service you have? Do you have something you can send me? You do have it now? Oh, great. If you didn't have it, a lot of the same information, that let's say you have a friend that's a good writer and you have a friend that's a good designer that's going to put together a flyer for you. You send this to them, they'll already have a head start. Okay? Rather than, again, Jerry, you call me and Chris, can you design something for me? And I need a little wordsmithing here. And you articulate it. If you would send them that, they'd probably get what you're trying to say. So that's why I think this could be a real powerful tool for most of you, if you're not using it already. How many of you have things written down, something similar to this already? Okay, great. Good. Any questions on this? I think it went around, but I'm just suggesting put it down in writing. And these are things that people are going to ask you over and over again. People who want to help you, and as you do your marketing going forward, you need to know this information. I always say when you're putting together a marketing plan, and again, it can only be 3 or 4 pages, put together some specific strategies. Just 3. I keep coming back to the 3 because that's what most people can remember. 2 or 3 strategies. This was an example of a marketing plan I put together. I want to implement some leads, I want to increase my brand awareness, and I want to do some recruitment marketing to get people to join the organization. Those are more strategies. And then you have tactics on how you're going to meet that strategy underneath. So that might be a good way to lay it out. So again, 2 or 3 overall strategies. And when I say strategies, somebody's going to say, oh, work on my website. To me, that's a tactic. The reason you're going to do a website is you want to be able to gain awareness. You want to make it easy to be able to get orders. Make it a little more strategic, and then put some tactics, things you're going to do to make sure you meet those strategies. Okay? At the end of the day, this looks a little complex, but when you have those tactics, lay out a calendar. Hold yourself accountable to do something. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do all of this, but for instance, I wanted to work on my web and our digital marketing, and I had continuous updates. We wanted to do some thought leadership, so I said, let's every quarter do a white paper to position ourselves as an expert. But put together a calendar. So somebody says, if you didn't do anything on your marketing plan, this is what I would suggest, is have something on a calendar, specifically, what are you going to be doing? Well, you're going to have a flyer, you're going to do maybe some events, you're going to start collecting testimonies for people who have already tried your product or service, and you're going to make sure that's in there. Maybe you're going to do a video, but list all the tactical things you're going to do, and then try to lay it out on when you're going to do it. I don't care if your calendar only has 5 things on it. Have a goal. Put it in writing. The other thing it does, it helps legitimize you. You're always working with other people to assist you, reaching out for grants, opportunities. This will really help substantiate you. Okay? There's different ways you can measure some of the marketing in your marketing plan. A lot of you know these. First and foremost is getting leads, actually sales, website usage. You can ask customers who are using your product what their thoughts are. There's different ways you can measure your marketing. I'm going to pop in a cough drop, sorry. Oh, I got this, thank you. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but I have a couple key takeaways. Have a plan, again, that has no more than 3 strategies. I see people that have 15 things they got to get done. Strategies, and then you have tactics that support those. Make sure you have resources to make it happen too. I have people that aren't good at certain things and they try to do it on their own. Solicit the help of others to assist you. Try to identify, especially as an entrepreneur, as many marketing initiatives that don't require a lot of time or money. Okay? Start small. Develop that marketing communication platform. It sounds like let's say you don't call it a marketing communication platform. Some people have already done that, but put it in writing. Okay? Make it easy for people to help you help yourself. Leverage outside resources. And the reason I say that is I can't tell you the number of small companies I've worked with or startups. I have, believe it or not, 7 brothers. Several of them are entrepreneurs themselves, and they've never ever used an outside resource for marketing. And I said, sometimes it is a little more affordable than you think. If you need somebody to help you wordsmith your messaging, you need a designer to help you with your logo or somebody to help you with your website. Don't discount that there aren't people out there that might be able to help. And I'm sure you guys have seen that already. How many of you have used outside resources? Okay. The other thing is, don't let the fun marketing overshadow what you need to get done. And let me tell you, I remember a couple Square One classes, we'd have some of our participants, they'd spend 2 or 3 classes working on their logo or their website. And don't get me wrong, that's extremely important. But they let everything else go by the wayside. And that to me, for some people, is fun, putting together designing my logo and my website. Again, extremely important. But make sure you're going about doing the rest to make sure your launch is successful. And sometimes you might have to pass it on to somebody else. Or it may not be the greatest logo, it may not be the best website, but don't spend too much time there. It's just like people that are looking for new opportunities, they spend so much time on their resume and you feel like saying, just get out there now and start promoting yourself. You know, it's important to have a good resume, it's important to have a good website, it's important to have a good logo, but there's other things to get done, okay? And I remember sitting in class and I had one, we finally had to just say, okay, your logo's good enough, move on, okay? Can you guys relate to that? Am I telling you the truth? Have you heard that before?
I think there, Chris, consistency, I agree with you, I think consistency is way more important.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, on some of those things where you can't definitively say, like you can't with the logo, you can't mathematically say one way or the other if the extra 5 hours you put into it is going to deliver you anything at all.
Yeah.
Consistency, you can absolutely determine what that does.
I agree.
That's really reinforcing what you are and who you're about. That's way more important than changing your logo every day, which is a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, you have so, I know you all have a lot on your plates before you launch your product or your service. And again, it's important, but don't spend too much time on one thing. So now I'm just going to open it up for questions. Just in general, marketing questions, marketing plans, branding, any questions at this point?
I wanted to kick you off with nobody else does.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on different categories that you've seen and experienced, and how long, depending on which category you're in, depending on what you're involved in, how long you should wait before you just make a determination whether or not something's actually going to work and deliver for you. I mean, flexibility has to be there, because you can just do it once for one day and then throw up your hands and say that didn't work. And it's going to be different depending on the brand. It might be different in the legal profession, marketing a professional services organization, than it is marketing a specific tangible product.
Right.
What does that look like? How have you been involved? How long have you had to see things out? What's the longest you've gone before you had to acknowledge that maybe you needed to make some changes or take a different strategy?
Yeah, that's a real good point. I was involved in a lot of new product development, and sometimes you became so passionate about the product or service, you didn't know when to hang it up. And so it's hard to give a definitive timeline, but I would always throw all of my ammunition and try to get it successful, but I'd be realistic and bring in people outside that were probably not as close to it as me, to say, you think, is this an uphill battle? So it's probably hard to give you a definitive timeline, but I do know that we try to go out with loaded guns. When we had a new product they were introducing, we first did it in a market, one market. So I'd say, again, do a test pilot. Don't spend a lot of money and test it on a small scale, see if it works. Then start spending a little more money if you see it's getting some traction, and then a fuller rollout afterwards. But I've been in so many different categories with new products, and it varies, but I just think it's important. I always tell people, do pilots, do small tests, and don't spend a lot of time or money, and see if there's, again, if it's building and it's worth now going on a rollout that's a little bit more than in a pilot. Okay, yes?
So I have a question. Connected with the marketing company here in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
and we're building our brand. We have a wearable LED lighting harness
Oh, cool.
for outdoor enthusiasts, public safety officials, and road workers. And so one thing that they brought up was that it takes a lot to build your brand when you don't have a name.
Yes.
They kind of threw out a partnership with a company. So let someone else who has that name recognition roll out our product.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a product licensing deal that way.
Mhm.
Now, we still want to have a name in the market, and I guess my question is, I guess longevity-wise, when you are partnering with another brand to roll out your product, and then eventually you want to have your name to kind of pull away from it, like, do you have any, I guess, experience with that? Any
Yep.
kind of insight? Is it good or bad? Pros, cons to it?
So I think that's a great idea, because it depends upon the partner. First and foremost, you want to make sure that partner is someone that has a brand you aspire to be. So I'll give you an example. I worked for Sara Lee, but before we were Sara Lee, we were Earth Grains, and we had a product called Earth Grains. And we had a product called, that was actually called On Kids. It was targeted to kids. It was nutritional white bread. And we didn't have a lot of brand recognition. We partnered, believe it or not, with Peter Pan. And so Peter Pan, we shared the cost of all the promotions. It was a brand that most people are like, wow, Peter Pan. So we always try to aspire to partner with someone that that could split the cost on a lot of our promotions if we did couponing, and then a brand that I wanted to make sure we're paired with long term. So I think if it's the right brand and it's a brand that you feel has a high integrity in the marketplace, I would definitely partner. The only thing I'd warn against is don't partner with too many brands. So sometimes I'd have people say, let's have 3 of us or 4 of us all partner together. Well, then your brand gets diluted. So make sure it's only 1 or 2 other brands. And the other thing I do is I do a couple tests with them first. Don't sign up to work with them for 6 months or a year. Because what if they're a great brand, but the person you're working with is harder than heck to work with? Or they don't come through. So I would test a couple promotions or events with them, see if they really come through. They could have the best brand in the world, but they could have somebody that's not easy to work with or can make it easy for you to execute. Or they may say, you're doing all the work. And you're like, well, I thought this was supposed to be 2 brands. So I love partnering as long as it's the right product, service, and then they're willing to put in the effort like you, plus the cost, share the cost. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
What would you say the pilot project in terms of, sorry, when you say the pilot project in terms of magnitude or numbers, what do you suggest? You know, it may vary from market environment, product to product, but you know, before going forward.
How many markets?
Yeah. Yeah. How big should be, or how small should be the pilot project?
Well, I think it's a market that's big enough that when you get the results, they're significant enough that other markets are worth trying. So you want a market that there's a good chance that it would succeed. Not too big of a market, because if it's too big, it's going to be too expensive. The smaller the market, it's easier to market there. You're not spending as much money. But usually when you're doing something to test, at least a good 6 months. Again, it varies with the product or service. But I would go to a market that's not too big, so it's not too expensive. One that you're in close proximity to, so you can watch it firsthand. So typically, we try to go into a market that we could be there a lot and watch what's going on. So don't pick a market in California where you're going to have to get on a plane every time you want to see what's really going on. Okay? What other questions? Yes?
You mentioned in your key takeaways finding marketing tools that save you time. What's advice or any tools you have for automating the tedious the things that can get tedious, like social media and blogs, and how do I keep from spending all my time making sure I have posts being rolled out on social medias and being able to focus on maybe more fun stuff or focus on the logo or the websites?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm sure a lot of you are already thinking to do this. Find out there may be a SLU class or Webster class that's looking to be able to take on a project that they can help an organization with their social media. So I know sometimes that's risky, but I always say try to find resources that will help do that heavy lifting or the things you don't have time, energy, or know how to do. And believe it or not, Mark and Ricky have seen this. There's so many people that want to help startups, and they're willing to do it and give them time and energy. And sometimes it comes second nature to them, and it may not for you. But I would say to save time and money, if you can, outsource it to people that it comes easy to them to do. Okay? So let me give you an example. I'm just using a simple example of a logo. I see time and time again people try to struggle to do their own logo. I know a woman that she helped a company. They went online and they put out an RFP for less than $250. They had the logo done, and it was done within a week, and it was acceptable to the client. I'm just using that as an example. There's some dollars you have to put out, but sometimes it's worth it, the time and money. But I would say, as much as you can, find people that can do that, and maybe they can help you pro bono. Okay? It's worth a try. What other questions?
I think on the partnerships, one of the things that I'd be interested in hearing you talk about as well is, a lot of times it's outside of the control of the pure play marketing elements as to whether or not they're successful. So if you're leaning into somebody else, it's dependent on their sales team.
Yep.
And how do you make sure that that team gets trained, that they take it seriously, that it's structured in a way that their management's actually grading them on it,
Yep.
other than just pay lip service?
Yep, that's a good point. It's almost like having a broker who has 100 different products and you expect them to put their focus on yours. So yeah, that's a real good point, Mark. You have to make sure that they have somebody that can help fill. But again, I say go back to, don't put all your eggs in the basket. Test them, and they'll test you. They want to try you on for size and make sure you can come through as well. But I will tell you, not that any of you are in a position, you may or may not to sign any contract. I always tell people, I don't care if you're working for a Fortune 500 company or you're a startup, don't sign a contract yet. Test people on a smaller basis. They'll incentivize you to say, well, if you sign a 6-month contract for SEO, you get a better price. But why invest in 6 months? See if they'd be willing to do it for a month. And they're going to say, well, you can't take 6 months to be able to get the results. But you'll find out in a month. You may not see the SEO results, but you'll find out if this is somebody that I trust, somebody that has high integrity, that is really looking out for me. So beyond the results of the SEO. What other questions?
Sometimes accessing the marketplace through a sales broker or somebody that has access that would take you 2 or 3 years to build up. And
Yep.
build up as well as they've already got it.
Yep.
It saves you an immense amount of time, and you're not necessarily buying that up front. It might cost you a greater percentage in commissions, but you're bringing value in that you're delivering new product to their organization. They're clearly bringing value if they can accelerate your timing in the market by 3.
That's a real good point.
Years. I mean, even large companies do that. I know in Europe, Nestle, obviously, Swiss corporation, is really well built out. And General Mills was not as well built out in the European market. But General Mills in the U.S. and North America has a huge portfolio of cereal.
Yep.
So they took their cereal portfolio and they basically entered a joint venture with Nestle and just dropped it into Nestle's sales force to access the European market.
Yeah.
That was a number of years ago, but it's an example even on a really, on an enterprise level where you had companies that were able to do honest self-assessments and say, you know what, we just don't have the feet on the street in Europe. And the other side saying, you know what, it would greatly accelerate our efforts if we had some really key brands that were proven with human beings elsewhere.
Yeah.
They were able to put something together that worked well for both of them.
And Mark brings up a good point, but make sure that partner, again, find out who their primary and secondary audience is. Make sure that the same audience that you're going after. Sometimes I've seen people partner and you say, wait a minute, you're going after stay-at-home moms and you're going after working women, and that doesn't make sense. So make sure your partner is targeting the same people you're targeting. The other thing I would tell you, if you outsource anything, I see most organizations, established as well as startup companies, their messaging is hard to understand what they're selling and what they're offering and what their positioning is. So if you outsource anything, there's people that are so good at understanding, interviewing you, tell me about your product, your service, show me your communications platform, and I can put together 2 or 3 lines that can go on your website, that can go on your collateral, and people say, well, they don't know my product or service like I do. Probably not, but they do this enough, and they're pretty inexpensive, and a lot of them are contractors. There's a guy named Brandon Toll. Words Have Meaning is one person that I've used. There's a woman named Judy Elk. There's a lot of writers in St. Louis that are relatively inexpensive. You just talk to them and say, hey, I need you to write some copy for my website or for my flyer, or help me with my communications platform. If you used anybody externally, you got to have your messaging clear. And even though you may be a great writer, it may not be coming across. So before you do your website, before you do your collateral, before you do your social media, make sure your messaging is clear and concise. And I see so many people that struggle with that, and they know it does, well, but my site looks great, my logo looks great. Yeah, but I don't understand what your value proposition is. So look at using outside resources. Just get a quote to say, hey, this is what I need it for. Before I launch a site, collateral, social media, I want to concisely say what my value prop, why should somebody buy from me? And if you can't do it on your own, ask somebody to help. And it may be somebody you can get on a volunteer basis. But there's people that are writers that have great listening skills, and no matter what your product or service is, chances are they can write about it. Any other
That's-
questions?
That's a really good point as well, because that's another way to stretch resources, right? And we don't always have the luxury of just saying, yeah, I'm gonna write a check and bring in a bunch of people from large agencies to do this for me. But I bet you even within this classroom, I could get 80% of the way down the path to starting a company without having to take anything outside of this room, just because of the skill set that I know that we have in this room. I'm looking at who would think I need graphic design. So like, I've learned where the people are and who's good at what, and I've had a chance to see their work. And if you can bring value from your expertise to somebody else that's in the startup community, even if you're just acting in an advisory role, that's money that you're not spending on the outside hiring a big agency at a point where it's premature, or it would be premature to do so. I guess one last thing that I would be interested in having you cover, Chris, is talk about earned media. And I guess the long game, how do you figure out who the person is you need to align with so that you can get trials, tests, coverage? I mean, it could be anyone from the media to someone in the buyer's office at the particular account you're targeting, but it's not just as easy. I mean, like, we tried to get, even for this class this year, we tried to get somebody from Schnucks, and I was just getting stonewalled at every single turn that I took. That hasn't always happened. I've done reasonably decent, but on that particular one, it's an example of how difficult that can be even when you've got a lot of connections working the system for you. How does somebody persist, and how does somebody find the right person to align with to convince them to do a test? Like, if you're a small business, you've got to be able to get in front of somebody and make your point really quickly. It's got to be the right person, and you've got to be able to draw them in a way that's not going to cost you a ton of coin.
So earned media, I'll tell you that one thing that I would suggest is in St. Louis, we know this is the fastest growing startup community in the country. And people, you all are in a great time now. People love helping entrepreneurs. One thing I know for a fact is most of these publications here, and I'm not talking about the St. Louis Business Journal, are starving for content. They have holes and the press is ready to run, and they're starving for content. You got to find out what the angle is that they might want to pick up a story about you and your product or your service, okay? So there's a couple things you can do. There's one tool that, and may not work for most of you, but maybe if it works for two, I'll be overjoyed. It used to be called Trade for Mention. And what we used to do when I was in consumer products, we'd go to all the local radio stations and we'd send them a kit. And it could be a makeshift kit of candy and some power bars and maybe some Gatorade and then our product. And then we'd give them a little cheat sheet. If you mention our product, here's something you can say on air. And they say, oh, we got this gift, from somebody that has a new startup company, and they gave us a bunch of stuff, and then they gave us a sample of their product. Oh, and here's something about their product. That's just one example. Obviously, that's probably more geared towards consumer products. But the other thing, too, is how many of you get the Small Business Monthly? Okay, if you're not getting the Small Business Monthly, you might want to get it online. That's a typical publication that is always starving for content and good news. So, and when I say you don't want to sell your product, let's say, we'll go back to the idea about, let's say you're selling skis. You're going to give tips on where to go skiing this winter, how to fix your skis, and you're going to tell Small Business Monthly, hey, I'd like to write an article to give your viewers tips, tools, and suggestions. And then at the bottom, they'll probably give a plug on what you do in your product. And so most of these publications are starving. So find out whatever product or service you have or technology, what are the publications that more likely would publish something about you, and contact the editor. I mean, send them a $5 Starbucks card and say, hey, I have a great idea for a story. I haven't written it, and they may want to say they'll write it, but I want to pitch an idea to you. What if I help your viewers by giving you ideas about this, 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 and this? And they may be willing to write it for you, but you might want to send them a Starbucks gift card to that editor and say, if you have 5 minutes, I'd like to meet you for coffee here in St. Louis. Hopefully it's a publication in St. Louis. But sometimes you have to stand out in the crowd, and so it might be, again, always, most of these publications, they have skeleton crews. They don't have a lot of people doing the writing anymore. They're just starving for content. They're pulling off social media. So if you can bring an article idea to them, and it can't be about your product and your services. It's got to be what you know about being an entrepreneur. I'm in a Square One class, and I'd love to tell you, have you interview me about being in a startup in St. Louis and how there's 350 organizations that are helping startups. And then at the bottom, they'll plug probably your product or service or what you're doing. But it can't be a sales job. It's got to be giving tips, tools, suggestions for those viewers. So find out what publications are more likely to be selling your product or products like yours or your service or technology, and see if you can pitch an idea for a story. And that doesn't cost you anything. The worst thing they can do is say no. And the best part is ask them, would you like to write it? You can interview me. A lot of times they want to do that. Or sometimes you go to one of these writers, these outside writers, and say, hey, I need you to write a less than 150 word story that I'm going to pitch to some of these publications. If none of them pick it up, put it on your LinkedIn. Put it in on your social media. Sometimes those publications will grab it right from there and then publish it. Yes?
I just wanted to add something to what you were saying. Like, I used to work for a radio station, so trade provisions, I know a lot about that.
Yeah.
And that really is very helpful for a lot of companies with the consumer good product. One thing about the radio, actually the news station here, like Fox 2, they're really big on bringing people on their news stations and interviewing them about, what's going on. Now, of course, your story has to fit to something that they're doing, but for example, about 5 years ago, I threw an event basically dealing with entrepreneurs, and one of my dessert ladies came on to Fox 2 with me, and we promoted my event, but it was her making I think it was like National Cherry Cobbler Day, and so it was like, we fit into that box, and I was like, sure, let's go for it.
Yeah, just people like good stories, but again, don't list what your product is and the great things about your product. You have to make sure you're providing value to those viewers. And there's a way you can do that and still get mentioned about your product and service.
Ruzicka from Desserts Out the Jar. Go follow her on social media and go look at her historical social media. She knows how to make it work. I mean, like, she does it all by herself, and she's always got the angle. And local is like a huge angle because, to Chris's point, everybody's starved for content, so when they do get content, I mean, who wants to write about craft foods? Nobody cares. I mean, no offense to craft foods, but the more interesting story is somebody that had this great epiphany in the middle of the night at their home and developed a business around a plan they wrote that night, and here they are on your show and they're cooking something or you're sampling something that they brought you. I mean, those are the kind of human interest stories that are very St. Louis centric. And after you've watched and followed a few people like Ruzicka that have done this enough, you'll start to get a feel for what they're looking for. There's another guy in the marketplace, Dan Ruz, who does some cool thing. And Dan one time popped up in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They used to do a thing, I think they called it, St. Louis Business Characters or something like that. And I said, how'd you do that? And he goes, for the last year, I met the guy once that writes it, and he goes, for the last year, every time I see something that looks like it'd be the sort of thing that would be of interest to him based on what he's written in the past, I send him a link and just a friendly reminder, like 1 or 2 sentences. Hey, saw this, was thinking about our conversation, or this reminded me of that thing you wrote a couple of months ago. And he goes, finally, a month and small change later, the guy featured Dan as his sort of local business character. So there's like, if you're stalking, you're probably not going to get like the editor-in-chief, but you'll probably get someone who's at the next level down, whose writing is more accessible to you, that you can track and follow and reach out to, and you've got a much better chance of having them reach back.
And you'll be top of mind. I will tell you, just now when you go back, look at those publications that more likely your customers will be reading, and see what other people that are probably a lot like you are submitting and getting published. You can do the same. It's worth a try. And if you try it a couple times, it doesn't work, then I'll be the first one to say, hey, it didn't work. Don't spend too much time, but at least try it. Okay.
Our Christie had used a writer, and when she had some material, she said, hey, what do you think about this? And I said, man, that reads really well. What'd you do? She goes, well, I went and hired somebody that she knew, and I forgot the name of the person, the woman that she hired. But, I mean, like, there are other people in the marketplace that have done this, and it couldn't have cost her that much, because it wasn't more than, I mean, it was the web text, you know?
Yeah.
Like, by the time you condense all that down to actual text to text, it's less than a page to cover a website.
That's a good point.
And she had this lady write this up for her, and she said it took hardly any time at all, didn't cost hardly anything.
And they probably just interviewed her, so she probably didn't have to write a thing.
But it was written, I mean, we both pretty quickly agreed it was written better than either of us could have done. So, you know, there are people in the marketplace that are accessible to you. You just reach out once again in this network, like you come in here next Monday, or even when we go on break and you say, hey, I've got to reach out, and you say, I need to know where I can find a writer, I'll bet you will come up with the name of that person for you.
Yeah,
And
so
the point is just reach out within your own network.
that's a
If
good point.
It's expensive, you might be stuck doing it yourself whether you like it or not, because we don't have the luxury of just writing checks. But the bottom line is that not everything has to be done that way. There's a lot that can still be done on the cheap or for trade within your peer group.
But as far as marketing, you can't go anywhere if you don't have your messaging down first and foremost. Make sure.
You're actually doing yourself more damage.
Yeah.
Because then if you change that every week, people are just going to get tired of not
Yeah.
just your message, but you.
Yeah, you can decorate it all you want, but if you don't have the messaging right, none of the graphics, none of the websites, none of the flyers really mean anything. Okay?
I think we covered some of that on business model canvas as well, where on the business model canvas, if you remember, you were tasked to focus on a specific target. It wasn't, hey, I want to be everything to everybody, and now I'm going to go write a business model canvas. It was, what's the specific target? And once you get that specific target there, it becomes a lot easier to stick to it and to focus, just like Chris is telling you now. It's sort of the logical outcome of that exercise.
Good. Well, I'll be sticking around. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I'll be in the back and I'll stay around for a while. Okay?
Awesome.
And then my
Thank you guys
contact
for-
information is here as well. Okay?
So we're going to take a short break. Let's give Chris a round of applause.